There were the German Nazis and the Russian communists, and the Russians persecuted heresy more cruelly than the Inquisition had done, and they had imagined that they had learned from the mistakes of the past. They knew, at any rate, that one must not take martyrs. Before they exposed their victims to public trial, they deliberately set themselves to destroy their dignity. They wore them down by torture and solitude until they were despicable, cringing wretches, confessing to whatever was put into their mouths, covering themselves with abuse, accusing and sheltering behind one another, whimpering for mercy. And yet, after only a few years of the same thing had happened over again, the dead men became martyrs, and the degradation was forgotten. Once again, why was it? In the first place, because the confessions that they made were obviously extorted and untrue. We do not make mistakes of that kind. All the confessions that are uttered here are true. We make them true. And above all, we do not allow the dead to rise up against us. You must stop imagining that posterity will vindicate you, Winston. Posterity will never hear of you. You will be lifted clean from your stream of history. We shall turn you into gas and pour you into the stratosphere. Nothing will remain of you, not a name in your register, and not a memory in a living brain. You will be annihilated in the past as well as the future. You will have never existed. With that being said, I felt like that was the most powerful part in the book, and there's a lot of powerful parts, but that was one part I wanted to highlight because it gives you a good illustration of the power that Big Brother has, is that it is this living creature that allows itself to just, in the end of the book, spoilers if you haven't read it, which not a lot of people have, despite them knowing something about it. The whole point was to purge people of their victimhood and get them to confess that they love Big Brother so that they would not be victims. They would just be erased from history. And with that being said, it is so aggravating to hear people misconstrue the ideas that 1984 had about people in general, how they were. This is so beyond anything we have currently, and people want to misconstrue it as a means of Nazi propaganda, which it was not. It was a critique of authoritarianism at its utmost. It's not necessarily... It was more of an authoritarian socialism, which a lot of people tend to go for now, even though it is just as corrupted. It can get to its own point where it becomes as corrupt as capitalism, but it's still a critique in a way that is talking about they fear love because it's the one thing they can't control. It is the thing that... The whole point of the book was an illustration of individualism, being able to hold on to yourself by loving people, having connections, not this individualistic BS that the video talked about in great lengths. After reading the book 1984, I went on the internet and looked at simple things that I could understand I basically wanted to see what people's opinion is. It's one of those books that people have said they read, but they don't really understand. So I went to go look on the internet to see what people had said about it and see if people were wrong or right, or what, what's the consensus for this. So in my research, I came across a YouTuber named Moon, and he had essentially given an entire video about how 1984 is, how he kind of shoehorned what it was, and then said that it was just his projection of Nazi indoctrination. Like he wanted to instill the concept that the Nazis were right, kind of deal. He compares book burning to Roald Dahl books being taken off the shelf because they have racial insensitivity, but that in comparison, well, of course he's not going to make this leap, but it's definitely, he's comparing it to things like genderqueer being taken out of like Florida schools, with Ron DeSantis. Oh, it was definitely Ron DeSantis was put into like the video at some point. He knows who the asshole is, and he knows that at one point he banned a literal ton of books from child's libraries, which were educational at best and slightly offensive at worst, especially if you do the smallest amount of research. I do a lot of research, but it doesn't take that much research to know anything when it comes to this. It's crazy. So if you and just the slightest amount of repression, censorship and all this stuff, he's comparing this to like they controlling you, and it's really slimy and gritty. Like he's just using 1984 as a prop to incite that they're controlling you, and it tells me that he's not right. Just 1984. He obviously watched the movie because he did take a lot of context from the movie, which I was surprised there was a lot of things that they included, and some of them they really, I guess for audiences they took out. So, yeah, good on them. But it really shows his neglect for any amount of research or understanding. Having any sort of weakness in your, allowing yourself to be weak is considered another part of social degeneracy. The big cycle, right? And more conspiracy theories that are just Nazi dog whistles. Biden bad because he's rich, which he did say that rich people are essentially bad because they have money, and you are suffering because you are poor. But he'd only if he was talking about rich people, he only indicated that it was liberal people who were the bad people who are rich. It was okay to be rich insofar as you're a conservative, but if you're a liberal, it's degenerate. It was this appealing to emotion, but at one point he criticizes capitalism, but it's only bad if it's liberals who have any sort of capitalism. And to be fair, capitalism sucks, but it doesn't justify it because my people are rich, therefore it's good, and your people are rich, therefore it's bad. he doesn't really challenge the system in any meaningful way, which is, kind of what 1984 was challenging, the fact that, and he never talked about, like, the concept of the proletariat having them, being a moving force that could drive a wedge between the people in power and their power structures, right? So it was at multiple points in the book, he made it a point to say, at one point he asks O'Brien while he's being tortured, are the proletarians able to do something to, I think they're the only hope I have. Right? As he's being tortured, he's like, the only hope I have is the proletarians, because they're able to do resistance. And O'Brien's only rebuttal to this is to say, nuh-uh. Like, they don't have the means, or they don't have the mental integrity or the collectivism in order to do so, which only illustrates the point that Orwell, a socialist, was trying to illustrate, is that the people have the power to take over, which a Nazi like this guy wouldn't understand that point that he was trying to make with that. And again, he watched the movie. I don't know how much of it translated from the movie to, or the book to the movie, but the concept that he was trying to illustrate, that George Orwell was trying to illustrate, is that the people have the power to take down the bourgeois, which, yeah. So, PayPal's misinformation sparks backlash, which, if you look into the article, he's completely, like, the first paragraph is him saying, oh, well, they did this. And then the second and last is just, they realize they screwed up, which, and then they, like, take back everything. So it's like, okay. All right. The story of Job, choosing to be complacency is morally good. Yeah, that was fun. I'm just reading my notes if you're wondering. Oh yeah, degeneracy is women's sexuality. Let's see. Oh yeah, he cites Fox News at one point, which is his only article that says he's right, which is funny as fuck, because most of the time it's just people having no, like, anything to back up what they're saying to be true. He does talk about the Great Reset, blatant misrepresentation from political. He does, like, I think Fox News is his only one, but then again, Fox News is a trash source. Classes over proletarian revolution. Oh yeah. So yeah, like, the entire thing is just a Nazi dog whistle, and it's amazing to me how much he tries to get along with, and it has so many views and nobody really, like, rebutting it and too much. It's like, if he actually read the book or understood what was trying to be said. And this is the thing. When it comes to conservatives in general and their blatant misrepresentation of anything historical, they're trying to talk about the Great Reset or something like this. It is Republicans trying to dog whistle conspiracy theories and push a narrative that is blatantly misrepresented. And it's fascinating to me how much, like, the audience of the average conservative doesn't feel it necessary to do any, like, I fucking researched the hell out of this. Every time that he would source something, I'd immediately go to it, and I would find stuff that was relevant to what he was talking about. And it was like, okay, well, this source. Okay, I researched that source. Turns out he didn't read the source. And it's just amazing to me how much these people just don't research anything. Like, they are in a cult. And they use any scary thing as a means of kind of pushing a narrative that would scare others into complacency. And the fact of the matter is that if you do any amount of research, it just doesn't do anything. Like, it's crazy how much, like, they don't read or they don't research, but they try to pass on their ideas as if they're true. And because they don't care about what is true. This is the intellectual peak of fascism, is this concept of nothing should mean anything because everything is interpretable. Everything is mystical and can be interpreted away. You have the weak men, or strong men create strong society, weak men, that whole thing. I don't remember what it is offhand. But the idea is, you look for societies that have lived that life cycle and they don't exist. And it's crazy. So in conclusion, 1984 is, I think, as far as like a country that has anything to do with, as close as 1984 is to the real world applications, it'd be something like North Korea, if I had to guess. And that's as close as it is right now. We don't have a socialist utopia or dystopia, because most of it is, there's a lot of capitalist dystopias, but that's beside the point. This is more of a critique on, during the entire video that the Moon did of 1984, he pretty much spells out like Nazi talking points in a way that kind of misses the forest for the trees for a lot of what 1984 was about. He interjects a lot of like things that don't really have anything to do with each other. He uses a lot of references that, if you do any amount of digging, kind of gives you the impression that he didn't know what he was talking about. For instance, at one point, he linked an article that said that there was governments shooting at people who were protesting. And then you look at the article, and not only was nobody harmed, but they weren't just openly doing this. Like, you look at the farmers were attacking the cops, and nobody was injured, and it was just, it was so deeply misleading that it begs the question if he actually read anything of what he was citing. And every single one of his articles, you do this smallest amount of research, and you realize that he never read any of this. Just as a heads up, I forgot to make an ending for this, which, in editing, be a bit of a problem. Yeah, so. Bye-bye, Ed. The juxtaposition of... So, in the video that I'm referencing, he also mentioned Fight Club. And anybody who knows, like, that crazy guy who loves Fight Club, and he'll often mention it. He won't mention the end of movie, which is, you know, them putting their evil, not recognizing themselves from their evil self, and much in the same way that he doesn't understand how Fight Club is a good analogy, an understanding of how we can kind of create monsters of ourselves in our desperate attempt to make ourselves more manly, I guess. He also doesn't understand how 1984 is like a lot of the things that he wants to implement, and a lot of the things he's demonizing or saying that he's like, he's saying that 1984 represents, right? He says that, you know, the state, or, you know, everything is uber controlled by everything. But the problem is that it doesn't, or it isn't, you know? It's like whenever somebody says that free speech doesn't exist and that we live with the thought police, they don't know what that means. They think that it means like being canceled on Twitter, or it means that you can't say the N-word, but that's not what that means. All right, when you have a situation like 1984 suggested, where it is total control over what you can and cannot say, you can't even think it. At any point, like at one point in the book, there was a little girl who turned in her father for thinking that Big Brother was a bad thing. You don't have that now, at all. Like, and insinuating that that's a thing is ludicrous, in my opinion, and it kind of deludes the point of the book. It's like they're missing the point of, you know, it's like saying, oh well, they're kind of finding avenues to tell you how to feel about like what's going on in the real world by using 1984 as a conduit. But the problem is that they're not using it correctly. They're insinuating that there's total authoritarian and control over everything, and that's not what's happening. So, in conclusion, just be wary of any time people tell you that, oh, well, everything is muck and everything is bad and you can't do anything. Because that was the whole gist of the video, is that you can't do anything and you gotta buy a stupid car in order to make yourself feel more like a man, which was incredibly stupid. And that you should isolate yourself and stuff, because that's not good. That's not at all good. And that was the whole point, is of the that was the aspect of 1984, was like he was saying that like the proletarians had the fucking right idea, and him isolating himself only got worse because, you know, he tried to make it better, but it just, you know. If I were to leave you with one thing that is, I guess, my issue with 1984, the video that was made about the thing, or just the book in general, it is that the right will never have a good, cohesive concept about what is to be done to make the life better. Not at all. They'll gesture to some end of times or apocalypse or something, and no matter what happens, they will always keep you afraid. And that is the point of 1984, was to say, hey, they keep you afraid, but here's hope. And anybody telling you otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about. So if I were to give you any instance of trying to pull something from all of this, it is, don't listen to charlatans who tell you to isolate yourself, because that's cult stuff, right? That is absolutely cult stuff. You have to be, you know, make friends, be better people, try to make good communities, because that's That's what the right's afraid of, is that you're going to somehow be better than them. And they don't want that. That's why they keep you alone and afraid. So if I were to instill anything, it is to improve yourself, yes, but also, improve your social situations. Make yourself more educated, make yourself more aware of what's going on, educate yourself with what is going on in the real world, lights turned on, and, I think if I were to instill anything, it is that you should let your friends and family know, educate yourself emotionally, and, go to therapy. For the love of God, go to therapy. I could not encourage that any more than I and, get friends, go out and try to become a stronger community, because that's ultimately what the right is afraid of. And that's why this guy is promoting. This guy is promoting you to isolate yourself, which is not what... it's not the good thing. It's not what you're supposed to do. That is how authoritarianism solidifies itself into, the world stage, is that it's just... It does so by, isolating people. So, yeah. Hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, yada yada yada.